Hello. The name is David Mills, and I was a William Randolph Hearst Fellow in July of 2019, and the focus of my research was slavery in New England, specifically in Massachusetts and New York, and generated a number of poems from this time that I was at the American Antiquarian Society in July of 2019. I have two full-length collections of poems published and a chapbook that recently came out focusing on the work from the summer. It's called After Mistic, and focusing primarily on the poems about Massachusetts slavery. I lived in Langston Hughes's house, his landmark Harlem home, for 3 years at a play commissioned and produced by the Juilliard School of Drama. I also wrote the audio tour for Macarthur-Genius-award-winner Deborah Willis's exhibition Reflections in Black, 100 Years of Black Photography, which was exhibited at the Whitney Museum, the Getty West, and the Dallas Museum. I've recorded some of my poetry on RCA Records, and I'm going to read you some poems. The first piece is called Unhired Hand, and it's after an enslaved individual named Quock Walker, who was enslaved in Worcester, Massachusetts, which is where the Antiquarian Society is. And after 3 trials, he won his freedom from a gentleman named Nathaniel Jameson, and this took place in 1781. And of note, there were at least 3 enslaved Africans who won their freedom legally in Massachusetts courts, and these were the first manumitted enslaved folks who were manumitted through legal means as opposed to running away. So this poem is called Unhired Hand. I offer you my unhired hand, and let me do the whatever work, wearing clothes outfitted in failure, outfitted in questions of was I servant or was I slave? The Caldwells, the brothers of my older former, who mastered them, my mother, father, had me working land fertilized by a cemetery of fish. Let me work with corn and squash and hens of Guinea and Cornish. Fence me in invisibly. Yeoman Nathaniel Jennison married my older former's widow and took me to court, believing he owned me, believing he could administer a proper disciplinary beating. How could I desert a master, for I would also have to desert the servant I never was? What of Exodus? Any slave who has been purchased may eat of it after circumcision. The Passover, the wandering in a clinched wilderness, eat of it. Then let the earth issue a verdict about Jennison trying to reclaim my spit and ankles, trying to drag me back to those sour hours, trying to lock me in an outbuilding. Encouraged by the brother blood of my former master, I drag Jennison before a judge for assault. The law is a black letter. I beg your leave. I am not services to be reclaimed, a bill of sale for probate, a fetter. I am not Jennison's few friends circling me, with Medford rum circling their tongues. I am not a case that rests because my mistress now also rests in peace. I am neither implied nor expressed, a Christian trip and fall. I am indisputable, a contract's absence, a holy writ, or yes, I may be the Caldwell's plan, the crack of abolition's ham-handed gavel, as I stand in Worcester's court of common pleas and ask for £300 in damages already done. There's a constitution plump in my skull, because I am just beyond the jurisdiction of flinch. I am not theory and practice, but flesh's plaintiff. Breath's 18th century evidence, Jennison's point unproven, justice's hiccup, a pinch of abolition, a legal sprinkle under intense scrutiny, a verdict, and the way it slowly returns. This poem is called Hear Her Before, for Belinda Royal Sutton, who petitioned the Massachusetts General Court in 1783, recounting her life story and claiming a pension from the estate of Isaac Royal Jr., who for 50 years she had served. Belinda Royal, like Quock Walker, was one of the first enslaved Africans who won their freedom, their manumission, through legal means. And it's also, I think, of importance to know that Isaac Royal Jr. Was a slave owner. He owned plantations in the Caribbean, and he also had at least 25 enslaved individuals working for him in Massachusetts. But he endowed the first law professorship at Harvard Law School. He basically endowed the law school because there was no Harvard Law School prior. So I think this is of note. The poem is called Hear Her Before. Obroni is a term for a white person. Belinda, they believe, was abducted from Ghana in the Upper Volta region. Agya is a term for father. May is for mother. Ogun was the Orisha of iron and metal works. Orishas are parallel to Catholic saints. What I call Western Asians, what you would call Europeans, because there's no separation of the Asian continent from what is called Europe, saw the Africans propitiating at a tree or at the river, and they assumed that it was animism. But the religion that Belinda would have come from was Ifa, and they have a god. It is a monotheistic religion, and the god is called Olodumare, who I also mention in this poem. And so if you saw someone giving an offering at a river or at a tree, it's the equivalent of like Saint Christopher, who's this patron saint of travel. You might see someone in a church making an offering, lighting a candle for Saint Christopher. They're not considering Saint Christopher God. It's an intermediary to God. Olodumare is the god in Ifa. It is a monotheistic religion. Ashe means power. I think that's it. I will read the poem. Hear Her Before. To hope a mouth can be divided between two houses, a lip for the Senate, perhaps a tongue for the representatives. To hope to honor the assembled with an African's petition. Humbly Belinda, though not her words, it was her life. 70 years removed from the Volta River, the Whitewood Mountains, the valleys, butternut squash. Nightmares can be an evening's omen, but no amount of imagining, not even the brain's wildest fragrances, could have prepared her for Obroni. Her toddler's arch unthinking as it gathered and released dust, as one hand cupped in her agyas and one cup in her memes, she praised Ogun, leaving alligator pepper and yam in a sacred grove. Ashe. But as she held her unblemished hands high, Obroni snatched her. She cried out to Olodumare, but was rent from parents deemed too old for the ocean's crossing. Watched by men whose faces were white as plates, she would one day be made to clean. 2. My hands were forced to give 50 years to Isaac Royal. I have heard his breath recently snapped from his body past half the Atlantic I was forced to cross in a bobbing wasp's nest. Only death could free me from this man whose walls boiled with splendor, house servants plumping his doors with their comings and goings. He opened those same Georgian doors one last time as the cries of liberty encouraged him to England. Freedom was an experience knotted up and only known in the space between my ears. Hunched, my body is now a gray rainbow. Worthy men, at your feet I cast nothing but bone and virtue, asking for an allowance from Royal's estate, £15 and 12 shillings, a pension for my sickly daughter and me. Think on this. Prayer is two hands holding nothing, waiting for something to come out of it. I beg something for the breaths remaining for us both. This February, this Boston, this Valentine's, 1783. X. Here is my mark. You've heard my before. Permit me this after. One other note about Isaac Royal Jr. He was a loyalist, meaning he was faithful to the English crown during the Revolutionary War, and as a result of that he fled to England while the war was at full steam. The next poem is The Cooper of Sandwich, after Samuel Smith, an English colonist from Sandwich, Massachusetts, who in July 1719 beat his Negro servant Fortin to death, but was not convicted for this and claimed Fortin choked on his own tongue in anger. The Cooper of Sandwich. With as many children as months in a calendar, as many children as eggs in a carton, Mr. Smith, the Cooper of Sandwich, excited suspicion, excited inquiry, excited the public, which led to the arrest of this master from Sandwich for the murder of his Negro servant. A leather horsewhip, valued at 2 pence, in his right hand, but during strike after strike of his Negro's racked frame, during those bruisings and stripes, was Smith in his right mind? How do the chasms in Christendom, the gulfs of contempt, answer for this offense? When a man dies within an hour of a whip catching its leather breath, how do you acquit the Cooper of Sandwich? His fine a pittance, 1 shilling, 5 pounds, 6 pence. In a coming country of malice and forethought, in a county of Sandwich, murder is a distinct form of servitude. There is God, there is a coming country, there is the Cooper who is merely defending himself against the inches of Negro air encroaching upon him. He acknowledged the flogging, but swore the Negro committed suicide. He acknowledged the flogging, but the eclipse of the causing was suffocation, died of the slave his ungovernable temper, where hence is acquitted and the Negro's tongue is punished, accused of killing itself by backing into its own voice box. These the words of 2 esquires. An indictment is an only under such circumstance. A conviction is an unheard of, and a master had never dangled for somehow gleefully snapping every bone of a Negro's New England breath.